Hello, everyone, and welcome to the first episode of 2024 of Bankroll Burners, the podcast for poker players who can't stop getting it in bad. I'm Mike,
And I'm Josh.
and we are here, as always, to bring you some hands that we have played recently. We're going to go through them, live react to each other's hands, and try to figure out how we could have played them better. Uh, Spoiler alert, they were played poorly, as is tradition on this show.
Yeah, I mean 2024 getting started with a bang, as the same as 2023 really. We're looking forward to bringing you another year of some the worst poker content you can imagine, but as always, if you've listened and stuck with us, thank you. And to our new listeners that will hopefully be arriving, welcome.
Welcome, welcome. All right. Well, Josh, I understand that today we're going to be talking through a bit of solver work. You and I each have a hand here that we've brought through a solver, so I'm interested to see, if that adds a layer of depth to our analysis and further demonstrates what donkeys we are.
Yeah, add another layer of slime to our already dirty analysis. Yes, I will definitely kick things off here. I did run this hand through a solver, but it did become useless quite quickly. Just in case people are not aware what solvers are, how they work, and why they're not really applicable for the games we play. Solvers are basically AI or machine learning programs that learn the game of poker and play it millions and millions of hands against itself to determine sort of an optimal, unexploitable strategy that kind of works from a balanced perspective. And that's why you kind of hear us talking about balance a lot, is just because when you're in sort of solver land, that's the terminology we like to use. However, when you wind up going to multi-way spots and people are opening to huge sizes and just showing up with crazy hands, solvers only assume certain hands are in your opening ranges and the cards that you actually show up with, so they quickly become useless for these sort of low-stakes live games. But on occasion, especially when you have sort of 3-bet or 4-bet pots, you do kind of wind up in a land where you are going to be heads up and the action is going to proceed somewhat similar to how the solver might see it. And then you can kind of use it as a benchmark to see, what would be correct sort of in a vacuum. And of course, then you can make all sorts of exploits for your opponent's tendencies and your own image and things like that.
Yeah, and I will say too, people, you're saying here, in some ways they're useless in the games we play. I will push back on that a little bit. They're not useless. Solvers are a useful tool for learning patterns and kind of seeing what the computer does in sort of many similar spots and picking up on these sorts of things. And then you're able to apply those in various situations as long as you can kind of understand why the computer is making a decision it is. So it's not useless, and so it's very usually what is useless is to run a specific hand through a solver from a low stakes game. Is as Josh said, it's very rare that is actually an especially useful endeavor, but we'll see
and
about
that's a great point, and I didn't mean to say that there's no point in studying them. Of course, it's very nice to sort of see, for example, what different hand classes do in general on different, board textures as the pre-flop aggressor or as not the pre-flop aggressor. And we do that sometimes, if you find yourself in a super multi-way spot and you obviously, even if you're the pre-flop aggressor, you're probably going to be checking a lot more. But sometimes it's nice to know, hey, if it were heads up in a bit more of a standard spot, what types of hands would I want to be continuing with on this board? And that can help sort of guide your analysis towards maybe what you want to be continuing with in, as sort of more players get added to the hand and it becomes a bit more non-standard.
Absolutely. All right, so kick us off here. What's the setup here? Is this 1-3, I assume?
Yep, this is the 1-3 game at Encore, which has been my regular game recently. I really have to say, first of all, that I've really enjoyed almost all of the tables I've been at. A lot of really good folks, regs and visitors, all sorts of just, been very friendly games. Lots of nice people as we all try to take each other's money.
Cool.
And yes, so this hand is going to be about 350 effective at 1-3. We're playing 7-handed at this point, and we're playing against a gentleman who sat down fairly recently. I don't really know anything about him, haven't played with him before. He's kind of a not old but older fellow, so my initial thought is that he's likely sort of a standard-ish reg, but I don't want to make any assumptions really at this point.
Okay.
And he is going to be under the gun, 7-handed, so kind of middle position here. And he opens to 15. Hero is in the hijack with Queen of Hearts, Queen of Clubs.
All right.
I 3-bet to 50.
Fairly standard here.
Yep, it folds all the way back to him, and he calls.
Imagine that.
What?
I said, imagine that.
I know, right?
Yeah. So heads up pot, 3-bet pot. Sweet. This is the sort of thing we can definitely try to use a solver for. And we got about 3 SPR, which is, that's pretty small.
Right.
It's not like
is pretty small.
Ridiculously small. They say once you get below 2 SPR in a cash game, not a lot of folding tends to occur.
Yeah, I mean, especially like over pairs, and this is kind of the thing about playing deep, and we've talked about this before, but, if you have a 1-3 game, it might look deep, 350 effective, you think, oh, more than 100 big blinds, but then the opens to 15, and now all of a sudden you're looking at actually a fairly shallow SPR, especially if there's any sort of re-raising going on. This stack was 120 big blinds deep almost, and now we're at a 3 SPR on the flop. And nothing crazy happened. So, the flop now is kind of where things get interesting. The flop is going to come out 8 of diamonds, 7 of diamonds, 6 of clubs.
So straight possible on board already. Flush draws abound. You're not blocking any of those flush. You're not blocking that flush draw. So it's not a very good flop.
Yes. So the villain goes ahead and checks it over to me. And I decided to just check this one back, as I think I would do with my entire range.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, you think about a low jack open, an under the gun, actually.
So it's middle position. It's 1 to the right of the low jack, because we were playing 7-handed in this case.
Yeah, I mean, you think about an optimal opening range for that position, and open and then call a 3-bet, they're actually not going to connect with this board all that much at all. I would say, sure, they can have some 8s and 7s, and even some 6s, but not a lot. And you are also going to have some of those too. So I don't actually think this board is that bad for you in solver land where someone is not playing too many hands here. But versus the typical live population, they are going to have hands here that they probably shouldn't. They're going to have more 8-7s and 7-6s. They're going to have some 10-9s, maybe more 10-9s than they should. Could even have some 10-9 off. You know how players can be. They're going to have a lot more flush draws. I mean, they should have almost no flush draws in reality, but they're going to have a lot here. So I don't know. I mean, you could say, for that reason, you're probably correct to check a lot here, but I wonder if you may be betting this board versus an optimal range.
Well, see, it's interesting you say that, and this is something I was pretty surprised to see from the solver, is that actually in this sort of GTO land where they're quite tight, the board favors the pre-flop, the middle position player to such an extent that the solver prefers them leading with almost their entire range.
Wow. All right. So I stand completely corrected and was totally wrong.
Which I was shocked to see, because I was like, all right, I just want to double check that this is sort of the type of board that I should be checking back on, or maybe, as you say, villain's got enough hands like pocket jacks and pocket 10s, and not enough hands to connect here. But yeah, villain's supposed to be sort of betting pretty much their entire range, which I was pretty surprised to see. So given that, once they check, I mean, this is kind of where the solver analysis stops being super useful, right? Just because they're, and this is another sort of limitation of solvers, is that if it says, hey, big blind or middle position should be checking or should be betting like 85% of the time here, and then they check, the hands that the solver then assigns them are fairly limited from this point on.
Yeah, it's probably not really worth continuing the solver at that point for those reasons, but I do think that's just a really interesting learning. What are these strong hands in their range? Is it just because do they just have a lot of 8, 7, 6s, things like that?
Exactly. So they've let me click back to the flop. But yes, they pretty much just have all the pocket 8s, all the pocket 7s, pocket 6s. They also have hands like 8-7. They have more 10-9. The solver also gives them.
Oh, wow.
We're not really supposed to be 3-betting 10-9, but if they ever open 10-9, I think they're pretty much always supposed to call it to a 3-bet. So, and then they also do have quite a lot of pocket queens. They don't really have. I mean, they don't have kings and aces. We obviously have the advantage and the overpair advantage in that regard, but they do have a lot of strong overpairs, and then their bluffs are like all sorts, like ace queen suited, ace jack suited, pocket 5s, things like that.
Wow. Okay. So I was totally wrong here. But so of course they don't lead, I'm sure.
No, exactly. So he checked, I checked back, and the solver does like checking back when we are checked to, but as it is kind of difficult. You kind of have to extrapolate yourself a little bit here that if the board is good enough that middle position should be leading, it's probably bad enough for me that I should be checking it back with alacrity.
All right, so totally wrong analysis. Welcome to Bankroll Burners, and then
Hope
the solver shows us what's up.
So the turn is now going to roll off, kind of from bad to worse. It's not really, but it's the 10 of spades. It's not a great card.
No, I mean, you're now losing to pocket 10s, jack 9 suited, 10-8, which is a hand he can sometimes have here.
And
so,
any 9,
Any 9. I mean, there's not a lot of 9s for him. Yeah, pocket 9, certainly. That's another good point. So.
Well, he checks again, though.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah, well, so you start to wonder, I mean, what is he checking a second time with here? I mean, he could be trapping, but probably not, knowing typical live tendencies in spots like this. He probably has like an 8 or a 7 or absolutely nothing. I think the strongest hand he might have here could be like an 8.
Right. Or maybe he's got a hand like pocket jacks where he is also like kind of equally scared of the board.
That's also possible. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there's probably some value to be had here, I would think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think once he checks twice, he just it's so rare that he's got a strong hand. If I bet and he shoves, then maybe I'll reconsider, right? But
oh, for sure.
But I decided to take a small sizing here. I mean, I think this board is kind of unfavorable and dynamic, and I think I just want to kind of eke out the value that I can.
Mm-hmm.
So I bet 30, which is right around a third pot.
Yeah, I like this. I mean, this is pure exploitative play. I will say, I don't know what the solver, if you're still looking at the solver here, but with those whatever 15% of hands that he's going to end up with here, I'm sure he has plenty of traps here that he's supposed to have. So, but in reality, just live players don't trap in this sort of spot. So it's I mean, the only thing I can think of is if he flopped specifically 10-9, he may have that.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, this just seems like an easy value bet for small sizing and then probably check back the river most of the time.
Well, we don't get to that point. Is he now check raises but he takes a very strange sizing. He raises to 70. So he basically clicks it back.
So this could be him trying to see where he's at with a 10, or it could be very nutted.
Right, or it could just be him attacking, because my line looks so weak. Check back flop, bet tiny on turn, kind of, not tiny, but bet small on turn, could be sort of him making a move and just saying, I'm going to get you.
Yeah, I mean, look, you have to call 40 to win 200. You're getting 5-1 here. Is he just doing this to sort of see where he's at, or to just be I'll get this young kid 1 out of 6 times? Absolutely. So I think you can call here pretty easily and comfortably fold rivers if he bets. I don't think that he's not going to be double barreling here with anything except a very strong made hand. Unless he's, he might be better than we're giving him credit for, in which case, still fine to get bluffed once in a while.
So I do call here, and we'll approach the river when we get there.
All right.
But I do decide to call. So that leaves about 240 in the pot and 230 behind. So pretty much a pot-sized bet left in his stack. And the river rolls off pretty much a brick, I think. It's the 4 of hearts. So obviously, it does add. So the final board here, I'll pause maybe. Eight of diamonds, 7 of diamonds, 6 of clubs, 10 of spades, 4 of hearts. So the front door flush draw bricks, and it does add a one-liner to a 5, but I don't think that's super relevant.
Probably not. Probably not.
And villain does go ahead and rips it in here.
I mean, I think you just have to fold. Versus the live population here. Like, are they bluffing here 1 out of 3 times? Like, the live population, I don't think so.
Kind of the thing I was thinking of, I was kind of going back and I was kind of thinking, oh, what a gross spot. Like, do I just have to fold? But I guess a few things kind of came to mind. And the first is, like, I just think his line is so weird. Like, I don't think I don't know. I don't really see a lot of live players doing this, like, min-raise turn into jam with, like, a nutted hand. Like, I don't know. I feel like he would either raise larger on turn because, like, he's just not thinking about the stack sizes, or bet himself on the turn if he had a strong hand. Because, like, that's just how, I don't know. It's just, like, how players play.
Yeah, it's true. That's fair.
And the other aspect is kind of, I think this is, like, kind of a crush live poker theory where, when we, like, check back flop, bet small on turn, and the board is so unfavorable for us, like, even live players are going to show up with a lot more bluffs than you'd expect, just because of sort of the board texture and the and sort of the nature of our play. Our hand is, like, pretty face up as being either, like, an overpair or, like, maybe some kind of ace king type hand that they just think they can always push around on a board like this.
Interesting. Yeah, I hear you. No, I don't think it's crazy to call. Like, I do think that there is some amount of bluffing here. I wonder if it's really happening 1 out of 3 times that this is a bluff.
Right. I mean, that is the question. Because, like, yeah, absolutely. Like, a pot-sized jam is not common, right? Like, especially a pot-sized jam is a bluff. Like, and this is something that I've definitely been working on, is just, like, folding 2 big bets on the river, right? Like, in many scenarios. But, like, it's, and especially if the board is, like, good for your range and someone is just bombing the river, like, you're just crushed. Like,
yeah, that's for sure true.
So often. But, like, in a spot like this, I just felt like he took such, like, between the weirdness of his line and, like, the bat, kind of the texture of the board, I basically eventually decided, like, you know what, I'm going to check my hand for a diamond, because, like, maybe he's got some weird flush draw that he decided to, like, min-raise the turn to, try and see a cheap river. So I'm just going to check my hand for a diamond and decide based on that. I do not have a diamond, so I decided to call.
Okay, I mean, look, I don't hate it. Like, certainly, I don't know. I mean, I see your point. And it's also, if you had some kind of live read on the guy, then that...
And obviously I don't, like I said, and I do want to be clear that this guy had sat down maybe 20 minutes before and hadn't really played many hands.
Yeah, of course. I just meant if he had some kind of a body language tell, I was like, oh, he looked really uncomfortable or something. I don't know. But, yeah, okay. I mean, I think it's all right. I agree with you that the line doesn't make a lot of sense. And I might get curious in that spot too and call. I guess I'm just trying to sit here in my chair and think about, like, objectively speaking, how often are live players really doing this as a bluff? And I'm not convinced it's all that often, but what happens here?
Well, villain announces ace high and turns over ace king offsuit.
Wow.
So
nice.
He just wanted to make a move.
Very good. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's interesting. Would you make the same play again?
I think I would. I mean, I just think this board, like, people are just going to start, like, blasting, because it is, like, as we like to say, and as we've made, as points we've made time and time again, like, live players do bluff, and they do, like, they are, like, smart, like, especially, like, people who play a lot do, like, kind of know the game and can kind of sense weakness and often like to attack it in the same way that we do, maybe in different scenarios, and that's why it's so important to sort of be a little bit more, be a little bit balanced and have some sort of strong hands that we play this way. And I mean, this is pretty much like the strong, up there with the strongest hands we're going to have. And
yeah, I mean, you think about, like, what are we doing on like, obviously on the turn, if we have something like 10-9 ourselves or a set, we're probably going to take a rather large sizing, I would think.
Right.
Right, and we should be in a theoretical sense, we should be checking back queens. We should be checking back kings, and probably we should be checking back aces on the turn. So when we decide to deviate and try to exploitatively go small, we are opening ourselves up to being exploited by playing in a rather face-up manner. So I guess, being cognizant of that somebody could pick up on that is important.
Right. So yeah, I mean, I definitely see your point that people, it is just a tough river spot. It's like, when people make a pot size or more jam, like at 1-3 on the river, it is often value.
Yeah.
And maybe he's not bluffing at the right frequency, but like if he's jamming ace king offsuit, which is, not really his best, would not really be like a prime bluff candidate, because like he wants me to have aces and kings.
Right. I mean, no, you're of course. I mean, he's not structuring in that way. So no, I like it. I mean, you've convinced me that this is a good call, because we are, like you said, our hand is sort of face up here, and people might be taking advantage of that. I think it's good. I think it's a good call. You've persuaded me. So.
Hell yeah. Well, all right, sounds good. So let's move on after that river spot.
Sure. So I've got another heads up pot, 3-bet pot involving pocket queens.
Wow.
So in this game, this is a 2-2 game at Best Bet Jacksonville. It's become my typical live game. This is $300 cap. And it's just that we're 7-handed at this point in the evening. It's pretty late. It's like, I don't know, maybe it's 1 a.m. And my tables have been breaking, so I've been moving around a lot. I haven't had any villain that I've been playing with for many hours. The villain in this hand, he had showed the ability to make large bets in sort of unintuitive spots. So I kind of figured he was a bit of a thinking player. He also wasn't doing a ton of limping compared to the rest of the table. So I thought, I'm not saying he was, some like grinder or something, but, he clearly had some kind of sense of what was going on.
His raising range wasn't aces, kings, and queens.
Correct. Yeah. So, and he was, I don't know, maybe middle-aged type of dude.
Okay, so what's the effective stack here?
We're going to be 285 effective with this villain. And I think we should run through the hand without the solver first, and then, relatively quickly, and then go through the solver, because I ran this hand a couple different ways. It's actually a lot less straightforward than I thought.
Okay.
So just to run through it here. So the villain in the low jack makes it $10 standard open for this game. And like I said, I have pocket queens. I have queen of diamonds, queen of clubs. I'm in the cutoff.
Okay.
And I make it 30. So fairly standard so far, I think. Certainly never flatting here.
Yep.
And folds back to him, and he calls.
Nice. Yeah, well, the only, and I'm not, of course, not going to nitpick, but I one thing I've been trying to do is, add a little bit to my 3-bets, like especially in position, just to kind of disincentivize callers, that are not that player, just going like a little bit bigger. I think that might, I don't know if that's necessary. I don't know if it's like theoretical. I think you're kind of allowed to go just a bit, like a titch bigger than 3x,
Yeah, I think that's fair. I will say, in this SPR, I'm not too worried about it. Like, it's not going to be hard to get the money in.
Yeah. I mean, that's totally fair. It's just, I think it's often nice to try and, I've been trying to, in general, go a little bit bigger pre-flop with, like, squeezes or opens over limps and stuff like that, just to try and incentivize the heads-up nature of pots.
No, I think that's a good point. Playing heads-up is definitely... I think we could say accurately that our edge is bigger in a heads-up situation than multi-way. So.
Yeah, I mean, yes, that's definitely.
So us acting like we have some sort of edge in this game.
Yeah, if we have an edge at all. Our anti-edge is smaller in heads. Okay, so what's the flop here?
The flop is 9 of diamonds, 3 of diamonds, deuce of spades.
Okay.
So fairly disconnected board here. And of course there is a flush draw. I do have the queen of diamonds.
Right.
He checks it over to me. And I do decide to bet here. What kind of sizing would you take on this board?
So let's see. It's a 3-bet pot, so we can go. Oh, and now we're what, 250 effective, 255.
Just about 255. Yeah.
So it shouldn't be difficult to get the money in, even if we kind of take a smaller sizing here. But the board is not like there's not, it's all low cards, so maybe we can go a little bit bigger. So maybe I'd go half pot here.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Like, we can try to leverage our nut advantage. We probably have less pocket nines than him, but otherwise we have all the overpairs in here.
And we might even have the same. I mean, you're probably 3-betting pocket nines from the cutoff against the low jack a good amount of the time. So.
Yeah, I'm mixing probably, but yeah, I have some 3-bets there.
So yeah, I'm happy to go a little bit bigger, but I'm also happy to kind of go a more standard 1/3 because it is like a 4-to-1 SPR. We shouldn't have too much trouble getting the money in.
Yeah, I do decide to bet 20 here, but I do see your point about going a little bigger because we have such a great nut advantage. The solver has some interesting inputs on that I didn't consider, so we'll get to that in a little bit here.
Cool.
But it seems like you're fine with taking this 1/3 sizing. Ultimately.
I think when you're when you're pretty shallow, and this probably and like you have a 3-bet pot, like 100 big blinds or around there, and with an open to 10, so in the ballpark, right? That you're allowed to just take small sizings a lot, just because like there's already enough money in the pot that it shouldn't be. You have avenues to get it all in by the river.
Definitely, yeah, and that was my thought in the moment.
So
that's why I went ahead and bet 20, and he did call.
So villain just calls. Okay.
Yep. The turn is the 7 of diamonds. So the front door flush does come in. And the villain thought for a little bit on this card before checking. Which I thought was noteworthy because players don't usually think in that spot. It doesn't necessarily mean anything, but
definitely could be a live tell. If he's like looking at his stack, then like I know that's one of like the most people say that's one of the most reliable live tells. Is if people look at their stack when a card comes out, it's often because they're figuring out how much to like bet or raise.
Huh. Interesting. Yeah. I've not actually heard that, but it does make sense because, live players don't think about it that much. So when they are thinking, it's a sign.
So villain checks here. I mean, I think I still like a continuation. I think I still like continuing here.
Yeah, my intention at this point was to play for stacks. I mean, right. I have like the queen of diamonds, so I am blocking some flushes here, and I just thought I just think live players can call me down for 3 streets with worse here a lot. Jacks, 10s, ace 9, any 9 really. Even 2 pairs sometimes. I lose to 2 pair, but I don't know. I did
pocket
think
jacks,
there were a lot of
pocket
worse hands on
tens.
this call.
You might even get called by like if he. I mean, I would not be surprised if like villain had called you on the flop with like ace king offsuit with a diamond, and that was gonna call whatever sizing you use here.
Mm-hmm.
So is your plan here to kind of go geometric then?
That's exactly what I was thinking. Was to bet a geometric size and try to get all the money in. So you don't think it's crazy to try and get 3 streets here and go for stacks?
I don't think so. I mean, it's a little interesting because when like when a nut changing card comes down, like sometimes that can affect our sizing scheme. Like maybe we don't go quite as large because we want our opponent's ranges are probably downgraded a lot. Mm-hmm. But given the depth, it's probably I feel like we can probably go geometric. I'm not opposed to the idea.
Yeah, so I did. I bet 75, which technically geometric would be 70, but sue me.
And again, just so people know, we've explained this. We often use geometric sizings, which basically means you want to bet the same proportion of the pot on the turn in the river, and that sort of forces people to defend with like the wide portion of their range, or else be exploited.
Yeah. And so he does call this bet, which I was...
Okay, so villain just calls. So we got like 250 in the pot and like 160 behind. So yeah, again, we pretty much got a 3/4 pot size bet behind. So
yeah,
I think you did a fine job.
Yeah.
Good enough for government work.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean, I felt like, I'm just curious, like, what would I do against you? Would I be going for 3 streets against you here? Would I be trying to get stacks in, someone who I know is trying to play more balanced and thinking about the game this way? I don't know. How would you respond if you were villain in the spot and I went 75?
Right. I mean, it kind of depends on my hand, right? Like, I feel like villain can probably start folding some like 9x. Is the
like
thing.
If you had 10-9 here, what would you fold?
Right, like you might have to start I guess you might have to start mixing 10-9. Just because like you won't have a diamond, right? Because it's a 3-bet pot, so you're only gonna have 10-9 suited. So it's like there's just it's you're not gonna have that many, like a lot, even a lot of your bluffs are gonna have a pretty good amount of equity. Like ace king with the ace of diamonds has like a lot of outs against a hand like 10-9. So if you punch that into like an Equilab type range analysis, you might not have the equity to continue with a hand like 10-9. So It's interesting. So I don't know. Maybe it makes sense to use a smaller sizing just because of sort of the texture of the board, and it's hard to find. A lot of basically you're kind of restricting the calling range to like over pairs.
Well, I think that most live players will call with a 9.
Yes. No, I know. I mean against maybe a player who's thinking, and I might call with 10-9 anyway. To be fair.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting. I don't know. I do wonder about maybe checking back here sometimes or using a smaller sizing if I think my opponent is, defending at the right frequency.
I think checking back here is okay, especially with a dime. I mean, it's interesting. It's one of these situations that we talked about sometimes where it's like, you have a diamond, so you're kind of protected. Like if he jams and you have more ways to like realize your equity, that also means you can kind of check back sometimes because you're not like you don't need the protection against another diamond coming off.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, I guess I don't know. I'm not very inclined to check here versus the live population just because there's so many draws to get value from. So.
Yeah, and I also think like pocket queen specifically is like a much better candidate for betting than like aces with the ace of diamonds, because like that hand literally just needs no protection.
Sure. And actually, maybe I'll take it back. There aren't that many draws. I mean, there's really just like, maybe there's like ace queen with the ace of diamonds, maybe ace king with a diamond, ace jack with a diamond.
Yeah.
Are really the draws I'm looking to get value from for the most part.
But the other thing is, right, against a live player, like maybe we just want to go for the max from, if he does have jacks or 10s or a 9, we just want to say, he's not going to give us credit for a flush. So let's just go for it.
Yep. So I did bet here for 3/4 pot, and he calls, and so now we're on the river, and the river is the 8 of hearts.
The river is the 8 of hearts. So the final board: 9 of diamonds, 3 of diamonds, deuce of spades, 7 of diamonds, 8 of hearts. So the 8 of hearts, I mean, it looks like a scary card, but it's not super scary. It really only brings in like 9-8. I would say is the only. Right.
Yeah, 9-8 or like I thought it was. This is a straight completing card, but there is no logical straight for him to have here aside from Jack 10 of diamonds, which of course was already a flush.
Yep.
So I wasn't really concerned about that as I thought about it. 9-8 is a legitimate concern, I think.
Yep, I think that's it. I would agree.
So I was planning to jam here. Still, I was going to go with the plan. Do you think that's reasonable?
Yeah, I think that's fine.
I mean, I just think, again, we want to get the max from jacks, 10s, and some 9x that he might show up with here.
Yeah, I think it is like a little bit exploitative because I think like it's pretty thin, right? But
for sure,
it is. How do you win at live poker? You just go thin, thin, thin.
Right. So, yeah, I think that it's probably not a great idea to jam here. again versus someone who is maybe defending tighter. But I didn't have any sense of this being the case with this guy. But anyway, none of that matters because he opened jams for 160.
Ugh.
And of course, this is the famous check call, donk jam line, which is always the nuts. And so I should have just snap folded. But obviously, we wouldn't be talking about this if I had.
Mike, it's like that. This is like the line.
I know. It's the line. So I was like, but here's what I thought to myself. I was like, I was planning to fold, but then I thought a little bit more about it. And I was like, this line makes literally no sense.
I mean, he could just have a flush.
But why would he... I don't think players do this with... I don't think I've ever seen someone do this with a made flush on the turn. Because it doesn't make any sense for them to do that. Because usually when players do this with a nutted hand that was already nutted, it's because they're waiting for a safe river. But there's no safe river to wait for. Right. You know, once you have a flush on the turn, there's like
but
nothing,
it could be the nut
no
flush.
river card that would concern you.
It could be like the nut flush that's like kind of thinking, oh, it doesn't really, you know, I don't need to get it in now. Like smaller flushes might, you know, I kind of agree. Or smaller flushes might even do the same because they're like, oh, what if another diamond rolls off? I want to make sure that I have like.
Oh, interesting. Yeah,
the nuts. I mean, like, I could see it. I mean, I see your point. Yeah, most of the time when this is done, it's like with a draw that completes on the river, and as we've said, like, it doesn't make sense for him to have Jack 10 here. Like, there's just no way he has Jack 10 unless it's Jack 10 of diamonds. Is he doing this with 9-8? I don't know. Like, the type of player to check call jam is probably not going to see two pair as like the nuts when there's a flush on board. So, I mean, I can see a rationale for calling, but even so, I mean, it's still just such a strong line that, like... It's
still a line that should just always be folded to. I mean, yeah.
Like, what is he doing this... What are you kind of thinking that he's doing this with that we beat? Like, do you think that he's doing this with 10s or jacks and he's kind of... He wanted to see, like, another undercard roll off?
I did actually have that thought in-game that I said it... I was actually talking to this river out loud because I was, like, just trying... I think better out loud, and once the equities are realized, I'm like, I don't care. So... I was like, I guess I beat jacks, which you could do this with for value. I did say that. And I was like, I think it's possible like jacks with a jack of diamonds or 10s with a 10 of diamonds might do this sometime. Maybe. I might be wrong, but I thought they might.
That is definitely a hand that could take this line.
Yeah. And like maybe wouldn't always, but might sometimes. I also thought that like ace jack or ace king with the ace of diamonds could play this way.
Yes, I mean, that's obviously giving him a lot of credit.
Yeah, for sure. But I'm not, I mean, I don't think it's impossible, but
yes,
I don't know. The bottom line is I couldn't really think of value that, like, my thought was, well, I can't really think of that many bluffs, so I should just fold. But then I was like, I really can't think of that much value. Like, I could not, I was like, what the hell? Like, you mentioned a small flush. So what, 6-5 of diamonds? Like, that's one hand.
Yeah, I mean, that is pretty much it. You're right, because of the 9 and the 7 of diamonds are accounted for. If we assume that he's not really playing... I mean, he could have, like, 8-6 or 10-8 of diamonds. But, you know, I mean, that's another possibility, right? Is that some people might play this way, especially if there was a high hand on, and they had, like, any sort of straight flush draw, and they just decide to call to try and see the straight flush draw so they don't fold you out. I know it sounds silly, but I have absolutely seen this happen.
Me too. I actually, during the game that this hand occurred in, I saw another player berate somebody for betting their full house instead of waiting for the river to come out to see if they could hit quads.
Yep. So just something to consider that, player could do it this way with one of those hands.
Absolutely. Yeah, I just thought it made no freaking sense. But the reality is that when someone takes this line, even if it makes absolutely no freaking sense whatsoever, you should just fold because it's always a nutted hand. But I obviously called, which is why we're having this conversation.
And did you win?
I did not win. I was shown pocket 9s, which I would argue makes actually no sense even a little bit.
Yeah. So he check call, jam. I mean... I guess Villain is also just not worried about the flash and just said, Villain is a live poker pro also who said, I'm gonna get this noob. I'm gonna go thin for value and get his overpairs.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe I don't know what he was thinking, but I thought it was. I did not cross my mind for a second that he could have pocket nines.
Right.
I don't really see this. But all right, I want to talk about the solver here because this is actually very interesting for this hand.
Okay, do you want me to pull up the first slide?
Yeah, please do. We'll just walk through some of these. It's not, say a slide. It's just, showing the solver outputs here.
Look, I make slides for a living. So.
Yeah, and that's quite unfortunate. So, no, I'm just joking. All right, so this is the output of his range on the flop. This is the out of position player's range. These are the hands the solver assigned him. One thing I will note is I ran this sim assuming a big blind size of $4 instead of $2, because I thought to myself, well, what is someone's 5x opening range is probably equivalent to a 2.5x opening range in optimal worlds. I don't know if that's really someone's 5x open range in live poker is probably similar to a 2.5x open in optimal world. I don't know if that's that legitimate, but it struck me as a worthwhile adjustment. I don't know. What do you think of that?
Yeah, I think it's fine. Like I know that like that's one like limitation of the solver, or one thing that we kind of have to work around is because people take weird sizings, the solver can kind of struggle to assign like proper ranges. So I think it's fine to, and this is something we do often, is just like pretend it's sort of an online hand with small sizings just to see a more realistic range, because this range does look, pretty reasonable to me.
Yeah, for the hands he's going to defend the 3-bet with. So these are, so this is his range, and on the flop, he's checking all his hands. This makes perfect sense. I did look at the equities, and we don't have that much more equity than him overall, but we have an extreme nut advantage on this board, which is what we talked about earlier. And so he's supposed to just always check here.
Although I do see that it's a little funky. One funky solver thing is like he doesn't have that much pocket nines for some reason. Maybe the solver likes 4-betting it occasionally. Yep. Like if you look at his pocket nines, he actually has less pocket nines than like pocket eights.
Yeah, so maybe the solver's doing some 4-betting with nines or what.
But... And that can affect the nut advantage, but that's okay.
Yeah. So we have a pretty high nut advantage, even so, and he does check, and so moves over to my hands now. And here's where you see something pretty interesting, which is that the solver's using a mixed flop sizing here, which we do see it do a reasonable amount, and usually, I think you agree, Josh, it's easier to play a one flop size strategy. Otherwise, the game tree is just too complicated.
Absolutely, and we do talk on the podcast sometimes about using like a split turn or river sizing, and I've even tried to move away from that just because I think it's really tough to implement. And I already am bad at remembering and doing things correctly. It just is what it is, right? It's like actually, it's poker's hard, and it's hard to do the right thing when you only have one sizing. So I've been trying to focus on more of a single sizing, but anyway, I digress. Yeah, but yes, we do not definitely don't use split flop sizings.
Yeah, I don't try for split flop or turn sizing. I do try to split my river sizing a bit, but it's not often that relevant because it's live poker and you're very rarely deep enough for it to matter.
Right.
So at any rate, so the two sort of, the way I think about this is there's really two strategies being presented here. One strategy is a single flop sizing, which is betting more hands, and then one strategy is a larger flop sizing, which is betting fewer hands. And so I took the single flop sizing is indeed, this 1/3 sizing that I did take. And so we get to bet almost our entire range. You see, that's the yellow sizing. You see, we bet almost our entire range with the yellow sizing. That's fine. The other option, of course, is to split sizing and do a lot more checking, and then betting quite large, 2/3 or 75% pot, which is that orange sizing, and doing that with a smaller number of hands just to sort of press our nut advantage. So those are sort of the two options presented, and I think either one is probably fine.
Yep.
So of course, we went with the small flop sizing, so we can go ahead and move on here. Nothing too exciting happens. You can see this is Villain's response range to my bet. They are folding a bunch of air balls, but they're mostly calling, and they're doing some raising with their own overpairs here for protection, queens and jacks, which is kind of neat. But they are just calling nines. They're not actually doing any raising. The raising is red. They're not doing any raising with pocket nines. So.
Yeah, all standard, I think.
Yeah, so nothing too surprising there. The turn is where I think it gets pretty fascinating. So once again, they're checking everything as you would expect. But what I did see was we actually lose the nut advantage on the turn
Okay.
when the flush completes. Because remember, the turn here, it went nine. The flop was 9 diamonds, 3 diamonds, deuce of clubs, or spades, something, offsuit deuce. And then 7 of diamonds turn completes the flush. They have way more flushes than us. And if you actually look at the hands we have that have like more than 75% equity, it's mostly just the overpairs and a couple flushes, but they actually have a bunch more.
But it looks to me like we are betting here a lot anyway.
We are betting here a lot anyway, but only for small sizing. We're never taking this big sizing, this geometric sizing that I took, which is why I think is some the part of this hand that I botched unexpectedly. I think is you're not supposed to bet large here because you don't have the nut advantage. We could talk exploitatively. Do I want to bet large anyway because live players call too much? And I think we kind of talked about that earlier. But it is worth noting that in a vacuum, playing against someone who's maybe trying to be more balanced, I really would not, with my pocket queens here, be taking a big sizing. I'd be betting small.
Yeah. And I think another part of the sort of betting small and another, kind of aspect of live poker is that, part of this like betting small is that we're betting small with all our hands that are betting, like including our own flushes. And that kind of gives us, we would expect that a sort of a more balanced player would be doing a lot of raising when the nut advantage switches to them. So taking a small sizing can also like induce them when we have hands that can bet call. But against the live population, it might make more sense still to take the geometric size just because, we wouldn't expect them to do as much raising. And so we might just want to put the money in ourselves and try and play for stacks against some of their weaker hands.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good point. I mean, my philosophy is really, I think it's very important to understand the optimal line, even if you then choose not to take it.
Absolutely. Yeah. I think this is definitely a really interesting point. Just note it, I'm defending your line, your actual line a little bit. And just another thing is because it's live poker and like, the way people treat bet sizings, like if we bet big on the turn and got jammed on, we could probably fold.
Yeah, very likely so.
Okay, so we take the small sizing,
might make an argument like for calling because we have the queen of diamonds. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. All right. Well, so if you flip it over now to the villain's response, they are supposed to be jamming pocket nines always, pretty much, which is certainly what I would do in their spot.
And is this assuming a large sizing, or is this assuming you took sort of the smaller sizing that it recommends?
This particular chart is assuming the large sizing, but I did sim with the small sizing, and it's the same thing.
Yep, and this makes sense to me because the pocket nines now, while it was very sort of nutted on the flop, and it doesn't need to raise. Once the third diamond comes out, like it does want some protection against your sort of overpairs with a diamond. It just wants to put the money in. Yeah,
absolutely. So it makes sense, and you see a little bit of jamming from jacks as well. And of course, sevens is doing some jamming as a set. But mostly just check calling for the most part, not even a ton of folding. Blue is the fold. So,
well, I think it's folding a lot of pairs without diamonds, I would assume.
Yeah.
Like when you look at the pocket eights, the blue is folding, the green is calling. So it looks like it's probably around like, folding the ones without the diamond.
Yep, that's right. So,
okay.
And then the river here is pretty interesting. You can actually see there is that the lead jam on this river exists. This is the actual play that the solver makes. This is the villain's range on the river. When the river comes to 8 of hearts, the solver is jamming most of its made flushes, certainly nut flushes, second nut flushes, along with some blockery hands like ace king with the ace of diamonds.
Yeah, and it obviously doesn't need to be bluffing that much because of or I guess if it's the small sizing, is this jam for like pot size bet?
Yes.
So I guess it doesn't need to be bluffing a fair amount.
Yeah, this output is pretty much the same for both these, whether I took a small turn sizing or a large turn sizing. This is pretty much what it says the out of position player should be doing. What villain should be doing is really ripping the flushes. So I think it's pretty cool to see that is actually a real line. Check call, dunk.
But yeah, it is worth noting that, to your point, that pocket nines makes 0 cents. Pocket nines make 0 cents. And actually, your hand is quite well set up, if our opponent was playing optimally, to actually be kind of a hero call, because it blocks... holding the queen of diamonds actually blocks a lot of his value and none of his bluffs.
Right. I don't block... Most of his bluffs are going to be ace-king with the ace or king of diamonds, so I unblock both of those. So it's quite... I think this is probably supposed to be a call. I didn't check, but if he does open jam here, I am probably... in theory, supposed to call my hand. That being said, in live poker, never make this call. But
yes, and then here's where we talk about why, ignoring the solver.
Yeah, absolutely. So anyway, you can see he at this point, you can move to the next one. I simmed it as though he checked because I was just kind of curious what it would show, and it does show me checking back pocket queens and not jamming pocket queens. Even though I took a large turn sizing and set up the jam, it thinks jamming pocket queens is just too thin. That's true. Also, if you go to the next slide, if I took the small turn sizing, because this is my range if I took the small turn sizing as I'm supposed to, you can see it's still not jamming pocket queens. It is checking back pocket queens always, even with a pot size bet behind. It's just too thin, which is pretty... Again, I don't think it's too thin in live poker, but it is noteworthy that it's too thin for the solver in theory world.
Absolutely. Fascinating.
Yeah, I don't know. So I think it's interesting to just see kind of what the solver does not like going for thin value in that spot. And that actually surprises me. Honestly, it does. I would think it would. The solver is a greedy bastard. But in this spot, it's like no opponent is too nutted. So
yeah.
All right. Well, we can move on.
Cool. Well, as we reach the halfway point, please remember to like and comment and subscribe.
Or just do one. If you could just hit subscribe, that in and of itself would just be like, that's like the nuts, man.
Yeah, that is like the nuts. And speaking of the nuts, also feel free to let us know how you feel about our solver content, because we are, we like looking at it. We like talking about it. Feel free to chime in.
Yeah, if you think it's really dumb, then just let us know. We will never talk about it again.
That's probably not true.
Yeah, never true. All right.
Okay.
Go ahead. What's your second hand here?
Okay, this is again from a 1-3 game. This is from a different table, but the same game, Encore Boston Harbor. In this particular hand, we are 400 effective, and the main villain's kind of a ABC, older live poker dude. You could kind of picture him. He's very... everything I had seen is that he was very limp call happy. He, was not showing a whole lot of aggression. And we're going to find ourselves in a fun spot. So we are UTG +1, which means there are going to be 0 limpers. We have ace of diamonds, king of hearts, and open to 15. And we get 2 callers from the small blind and the big blind, which is about as good as we can hope for.
Yeah, we're in position. All right.
Yeah.
Obviously, small blind here is going to have a very condensed range of mostly small pairs, maybe some suited Broadway type stuff.
Well, maybe in theory. In this game, small blind's range is going to basically be big blind's range.
Okay.
I would say. In general, people do not treat the small blind as sort of a 3-bet or fold or call condensed range type thing.
Fair enough. Okay. So,
but yes, in theory, you would think. Well, the flop is going to come down 8 of clubs, 5 of diamonds, deuce of hearts.
Not our favorite flop, I would say.
And it checks to me.
I mean... I don't know. I could see rationale for betting or checking here. Certainly heads up, I would bet.
Yeah, I think heads up. I mean, it's tough for our opponent to have all that many strong hands. We're really value betting ace-king heads up.
Yeah, I mean, I think we can probably heads up bet this board with all our hands for a small sizing.
Yeah.
I think that would probably be correct. But multi-way, I don't know. It's probably fine to just check this back, try and realize our equity.
Ace-king is also a nice hand heads up to bet the flop and then just check back turn and evaluate river, because it's so strong as the nut-no pair.
Yeah.
So I decided to check back. I mean, it's multi-way. I just think that one of these opponents has probably connected in some way with this board. It's pretty likely, and if not, then I have the best. Then I have the best hand and can kind of evaluate turns.
Yeah, I think it's fair. I mean, I would probably tend to mostly bet hands here that can pick up backdoor equity in some meaningful way, which Ace King off is not one of them.
Yeah, that's a good point too. Maybe Ace King of Diamonds could be a good bet.
I think so.
Okay, well, off to the turn, which is a much prettier card. It's the King of Diamonds.
Sweet.
And small blind checks, and big blind, who's the main villain, bets out for 20.
That's 20 into 45. I'd probably like a raise.
I think a raise makes sense. What kind of sizing should we use here?
Well, I don't know that we can get the money in. Can we? If we made it like 80, could we get the money in?
No, not really. Then there'd be 200 in the pot, 300 behind.
Yeah, so that's probably less of a concern. It's more just about... So I don't know. I'd probably make it like 3.25x or something. So I don't know, like $70 or $65, something like that.
Okay, I decide to go for sort of a smaller raise. I take like a 1/3 pot raise just to try and keep all his hands in.
Yeah, I think that's fine.
So I bet I rate that sizing winds up being 55.
Yeah, I mean 55, 65. It's not a huge difference. I tend to think players over defend. I tend to think players are fairly inelastic to sizing in these spots. So I prefer to take a bigger sizing.
Sure.
Here, but
I mean, now that you say it, do you think it makes any sense to like raise to 80 and then like jam river for like 1.5x spot? Seems like it might be a little thin.
I don't know. I mean, certainly he could have a set here.
Right.
So I don't... Versus we never can. So I don't really know that makes a ton of sense, at least in theory.
Definitely not in theory.
If this guy is so bad that he will call with anything, then yes, I would do that for sure.
No, we'd pretty much be targeting like exclusively like King, Queen, King, Jack.
Yeah, so probably no.
Yeah, so then maybe going small and then making a sizable bet on Brick Rivers makes more sense.
Yeah, I mean, you think about like if you're raising turn here to sort of a reasonable sizing, like let's say in the neighborhood of 60, which you are, you can get called here by some diamond draws, which he could have some, probably not a lot, but he will have some diamond draws. You might be able to get called by some 8s as well, versus if you made it really big, he probably doesn't call with an 8. So yeah, it's interesting what you would do it depends on the river, I think.
And we do have the Ace of Diamonds, it's worth noting.
Sure.
So that does kind of put we should be less scared of a diamond river, but also our opponent won't have as many flush draws to call us down with. Yeah,
that's true. I mean, you block his auto calls, which is bad, which is sort of a bad situation to be in when you're trying to get value. Because certainly he would call here with any, not diamond draw. Yeah, I mean, I don't think it makes a ton of sense to go huge here. I think we're mostly targeting worst King X and 8X here, which so I think around 3X makes sense, which is kind of what you did here.
Okay, yeah, I'm glad to hear that. I was not so sure on my raise sizing. Just wanted to run it through. So yeah, I think we just want to keep most of his hands in. We do succeed as the small blind gets out of the way, and the big blind calls.
I guess one thing I will say about this raising to... Well, no, never mind. I was going to say about raising to... Think about another reason you could raise to 80, but I don't think it makes sense. So.
Okay. Well, we're off to the river, which comes the 3 of spades.
Basically a brick.
Yeah, so the final run out here, 8 of clubs, 5 of diamonds, deuce of hearts, king of diamonds, 3 of spades. So, hands like ace 4 get there, 6-4, and if he's got a hand like king 3 suited, which there's only one combo of, he would have made 2 pair. But so I mean, I think this river's very safe, and if check 2, I think we'd probably bet like 100.
Yeah, it's interesting what sizing you would take. I mean, at this point, it's like will he call you with an 8 for any size? For like, is there like a sizing you could take where he'd call you with an 8? And I think the answer is he probably would call half pot for an 8 with an 8, probably.
Right, but would he bet? Would he, I mean, if he calls 75, would he call 100? I don't know.
It's probably pretty. He's probably indifferent at that point. I might go up. I probably think betting 100 is fine.
Well, we don't get to that point. He looks at me and starts shuffling his chips and says, "You have ace king, huh?" And then he bets 165. So this is an interesting situation because it's not really a check call donk.
It's a check. Well, it's only a single check call.
It's a bet call, which might be stronger.
You're right. He bet. Yeah.
So he bets 165, which is a slight overbet. It's right about pot size. He just like assembled a massive stack of reds and just,
I mean, I would call.
Bombed it. You think we call here?
Yeah, I would call.
I mean, what do we beat?
I don't think he would ever do this with a set. It makes no sense.
I mean, if he thinks we have ace king, then like he definitely would.
No, if he thinks we have ace king, he'll check raise.
Right. I mean, maybe.
I mean, I don't know. If he thinks we have ace, like, look, I don't know how thinking this man is, but like, if he believes we have ace king, then he's gonna assume we'll bet.
Maybe. I don't know, right? That's like, this was like such a weird spot because I was like, wow, he's like, because I mean, my line does look a lot like ace king, right? Of course it does. But then like when he's over betting the river. Like, what do we think he has that we beat? Like, we have the ace of diamonds too, so it's like he can't have a busted nut flush draw.
Yeah.
Like, I don't know. Do we just say, I mean, the other thing is we are pretty close to the top of our range, right? Once we check back flop and then hit the king.
Sure. I mean, we can have. I mean, yeah, we're basically the top of our range.
We can have we can have some ace 4 ourselves.
Sure.
Right? Probably all ace 4 we might bluff with at some amount.
Yeah, we could have some ace 4. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I don't see live players take this line very often. Like,
no, me neither. Really? That's why I brought it on, because I was like, I have literally no idea what's going on.
Yeah.
But like, it's another tough river decision for the Bankroll Burners team. As it's like live players are getting good, man.
That's yeah, or we're just getting worse. I mean, I don't know. The fact that we're at the top of our range, like, I think we could use that as a heuristic and say, well, I guess we should call. But I see merits to him. I mean, why would he say that? Like, I don't really understand speech play. Like, I feel like most people who do it don't understand it either. So I usually just try to ignore it.
Right. I mean, yeah, I think that's fair. But I was kind of like, wow, like, I don't know. Like, this kind of circles back to what I was saying in the first hand, where, like, this board is, like, pretty darn good for me at this point. Like, I have all the strongest kings, and, like, he really only has sets as, like, strong hands, or maybe some random 2 pairs. So when he just, like, bombs the river, it's, like, pretty worrying.
Yeah, maybe he has pocket 3s.
That would be a heck of a call on the turn.
I mean, it would.
Yeah. Well, I could see merit to calling just because we're at the top of our range. It's definitely a very exploitable fold. Like, if we do fold, because, like, but the other thing is, like, what I wound up deciding is, like, again, I basically looked at my hand, I was like, oh, you know what, I have the ace of diamonds. If I was going to call here with ace, if I wanted to call here, I probably would not want to have that card.
Sure.
So that's basically what I wound up deciding, and I did decide to fold.
I think it's fine. I don't know. I genuinely don't know. I'm at a loss with this hand. This is weird. I think it can't be that bad either way. There's actually there's an old episode of the Red Chip Poker Podcast, which I quite liked. This episode, they talked about if your opponent does something really weird and you are wrong, like, you really shouldn't care. Like, it doesn't matter because, like, you're almost never going to encounter the spot ever again. So it's like, whatever.
Yeah.
Like, it's irrelevant. It's like just random variance basically. So I don't think it really matters what you did here. Like, obviously it matters to your $165, but I don't think in the long run, like whether or not you make a call or a fold, here is the difference between you being a winning player or a losing player. We're going to be losing players no matter what. So
Yeah, exactly. Okay, yeah, I mean, I just basically decided, like, you know what, if I didn't have the ace of diamonds here, I'd call, because maybe he does this enough with some weird busted flush draws that are super funky.
Yeah.
But as is, I decide to fold. He does not show, but he does claim that he had pocket fives.
Really? Okay.
So
I mean, he could be telling the truth.
I mean, you know, and you have to think that from some weird twisted way, maybe he was thinking, I would check back ace king here. So this young kid is also going to check back ace king here, so I need to get my value.
Yeah, I mean, you know, maybe you owned his soul, maybe he owned yours. We'll never know.
And to your point, you know, it probably doesn't matter.
Yeah,
So, yeah, I just thought that was kind of an interesting turn and river scenario.
No, it is interesting. It's weird, man. I don't know what I would do. I probably would call, but I could not. I think folding is maybe slightly better, but
it's just like, yeah, I mean, it's like when people bomb the river, it's just so annoying.
Yeah. God. That's why we try to do that, right?
Yeah, I mean, absolutely.
Okay, well, I'll take us home here with a hand that, this is one of those hands where you can just tell me whether or not it's a punt. So. All
right, it is. All right, we're done here?
It probably is. You probably already can just say it is. So. This is going to be a good old limped pot, one of our favorite things.
And this is another 2-2 hand?
Yes, different game, different table, different night. Actually, daytime game.
We love a good limped pot. Actually, we hate limped pots.
Now, we do. I've come to appreciate them in a way because they're just so goofy.
Let me just interject briefly and say that I didn't participate in limped pots to such a degree last night that an older Southern guy said that I was like, oh, we got someone crazy at our table, and gestured to me because, you know, I dare to 3-bet, you know, 5% of hands.
Yeah, absolutely wild.
And I was very happy because I was like, oh, hell yeah, I'm getting paid off.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what you want. So
what's our stat? What's the effective stack?
We're only $150 effective with the main villain, and we are $350 effective with the other villains.
Oh, God.
But it's a limped pot, so...
Yeah, okay. That doesn't mean anything.
Yeah. So, there's 3 limps to me. From, like, late position, mostly.
Okay.
Well, it's, like, a couple late position limps and a small blind, of course. It's a 2-2 game, so the small blind just checks.
Got it, yep. And we're in the big blind?
In the big blind, yep. And I have Queen of Diamonds, 6 of Hearts. And, of course, I check this hand.
Net.
And the flop comes Jack of Hearts, 10 of Diamonds, 3 of Hearts.
Okay.
So as we can see,
I don't like where this is going.
I flopped myself an overcard, a backdoor straight draw, and a fake backdoor flush draw. Really.
So in other words, you miss.
I absolutely smashed this board. No, this flop checks all the way around.
Okay, and there's 4 total players, right?
Correct. There's 4 players.
Okay, checks around. Good.
Not really interested in this pot at this point.
That makes sense. I thought something bad was gonna happen.
Yeah, but the turn is a favorable card for us. It comes the King of Clubs, which gives us an open-ended straight draw.
Yeah, and no one can really be that strong here. I mean, you know, not a lot of 2 pairs. The flop checked around. It was a limped pot, so it's tough for anyone really to have a strong hand.
Yep.
And I'd say you actually could have the most strong hands because you can actually have all these weird bad 2 pairs, like, you know, King 3 offsuit and Jack 3 offsuit and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the small blind can too, of course, but they check here, so it's good for me. And I go ahead and bet $10.
Yep, and I think that makes sense here.
And the hijack, who is a nitty reg, calls.
Okay.
And the cutoff, who I know nothing about, makes it 20.
Aye.
The small blind folds.
Okay.
And I decide to get creative with a bet 3-bet.
Okay.
Because my thinking was that the cutoff really cannot be very strong. Min raising over a bet and a call.
Right. What about the hijack though? If the hijack's kind of nitty and calling in the middle, how strong do you think? Like, how nitty are we talking? Like, what do you kind of expect the hijack to have here?
A king or a jack.
And he might fold that to a 3-bet.
I think he'll fold king. It's probably not a very strong king, or he would have raised. He definitely has a raising range that's like, he would raise like king queen
or queen 9 at this point or something like that.
Yeah, sure. He could have.
So who's the short stack in this situation, and who's the bigger stack?
The cutoff has the short stack.
So that is a little worrisome, just because I think folks with min raises can actually be somewhat nutted when people are super short.
Okay,
right.
I think that's fair. My thinking was that I can probably fold out like. I don't know. I thought he might just be doing this with like a random king, but I do see your point that like it can, because he's short, relatively short. This could be rather nutted. I guess I did not consider that in the moment.
But I think it's okay to 3-bet here. I still don't think anyone can be that strong, and you can just kind of throw your weight around a little bit. Like I do think people will overfold in this spot. What's your plan if you get called?
I will. It's very river dependent. I think if any draw gets there, I will jam. My plan is to jam river, and if it's a brick, I probably give up.
I think that's fair. Like, I think if a heart rolls off, you can probably jam. Or, what if like a queen comes off? Do you think we can check?
Well, at that point, there's a one-liner
to an ace or a 9. Yeah.
Yeah. I probably have to give up.
I think so. Okay, so I think that makes sense. So if we get there, or the flush draw gets there, we can probably go for it. And if it bricks, then we give up. I think that makes sense. So
yeah,
how much do you make it?
I also just want to say, what are the bluffs like that I would use as a triple, that I would jam river with if a draw bricks. If the river's a total brick, I probably could still jam with a hand like maybe 10-9 no heart. I
was going to say, I think 10-9 is a super sick bluff because it blocks the straights that our opponents can actually have, like queen 9, and like just any random 2 pairs that they have. And like once we get called, our 10 is like very, very rarely good.
Right, and like having no heart, I think, is important as well.
Yeah, so I agree. And we should have. We probably have some 10-9 suited. You might open some pre-flop, and check some, and we definitely have all the 10-9 offsuit. So yeah.
And I also think Jack 9 maybe even.
So, yeah, Jack 9 is getting
have a little bit more showdown value.
We might win with Jack 9.
Yeah. So okay. Well, actually, no. I think after I go bet, call, raise, my Jack's no good. So.
Okay. So what's our sizing here?
I actually only make it 45 because of how shallow he is.
Right. So if
I'm not really expecting him to necessarily fold right now.
Right. So if he calls, it'll basically be a pot size bet on the river.
Yeah.
So maybe we could go a little bigger and kind of do a geometric thing.
I think that's fair. I think I could have gone a titch larger. I guess I've started to develop this thinking about like 3-bets on other than pre-flop, not like non-pre-flop 3-bets, is they're so polarized that like you don't really need to use big sizing at all. Like it makes more sense for them to be small. In the same way that 4-bets are so polarizing, usually you use the small sizing.
Right.
I don't know if that's correct, but
I don't know if that's correct either. I haven't really studied my like turn 3-bet sizing in limit spots, multi-way. Yeah.
Fair enough. So
I think it's probably fine either way, but I actually do think that like their range here can be elastic in that like if you made it like 55 or 60, you're gonna get a lot more folds now than if you make it 45. Like if you make it 45, I think he's never folding right now. And obviously like yes, you will have a little more fold equity on the river, but I think if you go like 60 here, you might actually start getting some folds here and still have a lot of fold equity on the river.
No, I think you're right. I think that's probably should have been like 60. I think you're correct.
Okay, so we make it 45, and does the hijack call?
No, hijack folds, and the cutoff calls.
Yeah, and it makes cutoffs getting like quite good odds also.
Yeah. No, I think going a little bigger would have been appropriate here. So, but the river comes the 8 of hearts. So the heart draw does get there.
And it doesn't change any straights available, right?
9-7 gets there.
Okay. Doesn't change that. Doesn't change any straights available.
Yeah. So I think we stick with the plan here.
Yep.
I rip it in.
Okay.
And we get absolutely snippety snapped by King Queen of Hearts.
Well. Yep. I mean, that makes sense. I mean, that's fine. Like, it's kind of interesting to think, if villain had King Queen no heart, is he?
I think he'd fold.
He probably folds.
I think I can fold out 2-pair with this line, to be honest.
Maybe. Yeah. Yeah. No, I do like the line. I think your hand is pretty well set up for it. Obviously our opponent is at the tip top of their range.
Yeah, literally I mean, first of all, this dude limping over limps with King Queen of Hearts is pretty incredible.
Yeah.
But what are you gonna do? I mean, yeah, I guess my thinking in game was literally nobody ever has any bluffs here, so I have to bluff.
No, I think that's fair. I think people absolutely will overfold like crazy to this line. And when we say overfold too, it's not like they're actually overfolding to the population. They're probably underfolding against the population.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I think that this was an unfortunate result. So you don't think this was a punt?
No, I don't. I mean, I don't think we have to 3-bet the flop the turn.
We have to take Queen 6 offsuit for a bet 3-bet.
To be clear, I do think. I mean, we can probably fold to the raise. I don't even think we're priced in to the raise with 8 outs, some of which might be dirty.
Mm-hmm.
I'd have to go back and look at the actual equities, but I wouldn't be surprised if we're not even priced in.
Yeah, you're probably right.
If we kind of assume our opponent has a king-ish, which is fair. So I don't know that we're even priced in there. But I mean, I think that it is certainly I think it's a fine line to do. I wouldn't do it all the time either.
No, for sure not. But
I don't think it's a punt.
Okay. All right. Well, I think it is what it is. I like to find these creative bluffs. You could say it's how I like to play the game. It probably, I don't know if it costs me or makes me money in the long term, but
hey, I tried to bluff you with pocket tens, so
yeah, that was pretty sick. Good thing I called like a donkey.
Yeah, exactly. That's the problem with finding creative bluffs too, is that sometimes people just call like donkeys.
Exactly.
But I don't know. I'm good with that.
Okay, well, that's it. Thank you, viewers and listeners, for enjoying another hour and starting off your year with an hour and a quarter or so of bankroll burning. We really appreciate it, as always.
Happy 2024.
May you not go broke this year. And please like, comment, and subscribe.
Yeah, we really appreciate it. It helps the channel. And Happy New Year.
Happy New Year. Bye, everyone.